Well, let's get another smart take on all things Apple, because all eyes will be on the iPhone maker when it reports results for its fiscal second quarter this Thursday. The stock has had a lackluster start to the year, down more than about 10% in 2024. Here with what to watch for the iPhone maker's results, Ben Bajarin, Creative Strategy CEO and Principal Analyst. Ben, it is great to have you on the show. So Apple does report Thursday. Ben, walk me through what are the key metrics, Ben, you're going to be focused on when that print hits the tape?
Yeah, I think the big one is just seeing where we're at in terms of iPhone sales. Most estimates have come in expecting it to be relatively flat. So maybe slightly up, maybe slightly down, but not a huge drastic change. So I think that's a positive. There's certainly been some areas of the world. It looks like some numbers came in that in Europe they grew, and in the US they actually grew slightly. Obviously, we've talked about before, they're down in China. So on top of just where iPhone is, I think that's where we're going to look at where we're at in the cycle, and then any commentary around that. How are things looking in China? Are we seeing a recovery in high ASP parts of the market? I think those are going to be some of the big questions. One of the things a lot of people will be looking at is there any commentary on mix shift? The last couple of years with iPhones, the buyers have moved more to the high end of the market, buying things like Pro and Pro Max. I think they're going to want to see if that's continuing just to get a gauge of ASPs. But a lot of that stuff hopefully comes out in commentary. But I think again, all eyes on iPhone and just sort of seeing where we're at in this cycle, and expectations are probably relatively flat.
When you talk about something like the services business as well, Ben, is that just sort of chugging along steady as she goes there? That's not really where the swing is coming from at Apple anymore?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things in terms of the growth business, right? Services, in my opinion, underscores the stickiness of the ecosystem, right? If you listen to management, they talk a lot about the growing installed base. Apple does not lose a lot of customers. They have a very sticky and they retain those customers. And then those customers spend money in the ecosystem a la services. So I think that's a stat that just continues to show engagement. We expect that again to continue to have some parts of growth. We don't really know how much cyclicality there is in services because, for a while it was on a growth, then it slowed. So I think that'll be a big question. But a lot of the numbers that they share around what their customers are doing, adding new subscriptions, spending money in the App Store, engaging in those subscription services, buying more, that's really just showing the health of the ecosystem. Because then as Apple grows new customers, because every quarter they talk about growing their installed base, those customers don't leave and they spend more money, which creates kind of the sum of the whole part story for Apple.
And Ben, part of the reason that the stock's been under pressure is because there's concern by some investors about the company's sort of Gen AI strategy. What do you think, Ben, that Gen AI strategy is? And do you think we get any more new insight into it on this earnings call?
Yeah, probably not on this earnings call. Honestly, I think the big expectations at this point is around their worldwide developer event. A big part of this, and I do think people sometimes underappreciate what Apple's doing here in silicon and Apple Silicon. But yeah, as anybody who covers the semiconductor industry relative to AI knows, that silicon semiconductors and their advancements in compute is the fundamental force that's driving increases in AI capabilities. So on these devices, Apple's very well positioned with that, with their Apple Silicon, their Apple Neural Engine, and some of those things that are yet to be fully tapped into for AI. Now, the big question is, what do they do for developers? What software tools do they do? And how do they unlock the software potential of that silicon in order to move and let more developers take advantage of that and then bring value to customers in whatever way Apple sees fit, right? We still don't know what the major use cases are for these things. We hope they're helpful, and I think we'll wait probably to WWDC to see what that looks like from Apple's standpoint.
Right. I was going to say, unfortunately, we're not going to find out the answer to that question likely this week when they report earnings. But also out with earnings this week will be Amazon, and I'm curious what you're watching for there, especially after we saw the big Azure growth at Microsoft. It'll be interesting to see what AWS looks like.
Yeah, I think that's the same. Everybody's going to be looking at cloud growth for AWS. Right now, it's super trendy to talk about CapEx. Everybody wants to see what the hyperscalers are spending in terms of new infrastructure, buying AI servers, creating these AI factories, as NVIDIA likes to call them. And I think that's really going to be a big spotlight being looked at where Amazon's growth is in terms of AWS. I think it's just probably predictable that it's going to be healthy, somewhat double digit. Where are they going? Where are they guiding? And what CapEx are they investing in? I think it's what people are going to look at. But I think expectations are that that's healthy. AWS is going to be strong, just like the other hyperscalers. But again, it's a very expensive environment to keep investing in that AI and then start to monetize AI in that through, in Amazon's case, things like e-commerce and a host of other services that they provide to startup developers and enterprises as a part of AWS.
And Ben, you think we could see Amazon add a dividend here? Alphabet delivered on that, right? Investors sure seem to appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's been a lot of talk. I've seen a bunch of speculation on this buy and the sell side around that. People want to see them move more closer and start to do a dividend. I don't know if it's this quarter, really hard to predict, but it does feel like that's inevitable. At the same time, if you look at between Google's kind of long-term prospects and just the behemoth that is Amazon's still a highly desirable stock. I don't think they need a ton more incentives to jump into that because revenue is going to continue to be strong. But I think it's something that's on a lot of investors' mind. And obviously, if they do that, I think there'll be a lot of positivity to that as well.
Ben, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us to chat about what to expect from these tech heavyweights. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.